Okay, let's jump straight into this explainer of the source material. Today, we're doing a profound re-examination of the ancient records known as the Gishi-wajin-den and charting the true location of Yamato. Now, for centuries, scholars have debated where this ancient capital actually was. But the sources we're exploring today propose a really striking reality. The truth wasn't just lost to time, it was purposefully, carefully concealed. So consider this wild premise for a second. What if a massive geographical cover-up was staged following a totally devastating military defeat? Imagine having to move the entire documented history of a nation, literally shifting its foundational stories hundreds of miles away, just to deceive an encroaching foreign power. That is the staggering conclusion drawn from a fresh, hyper-precise reading of these ancient texts.
Section 1. The Secret Eastward Relocation. According to the texts, this all kicks off with a catastrophic Hakusukino defeat in 663 AD, which forced the ruling sovereigns into a secret relocation. This was literally a crisis of sheer survival. The loss to foreign naval forces was absolutely devastating. Sovereign Tenji perished, and right after that, Sovereign Kobun fell during immense internal strife. So, to avoid total subjugation by a massive foreign empire, a desperate but brilliant plan was launched after 672 AD, a completely secret relocation of the nation's core identity, moving it far to the east.
As you'll see here, the texts outline how ancient leaders supposedly doubled the calendar and transplanted native names to the east just to confuse the conquerors. They manipulated the timelines, basically counting 1 year as 2 to push their founding way back into antiquity. Then they physically copied the sacred place names from the true heartland of Chikuho in Kyushu and planted them far away in the Kanai region. By doing this, they effectively created a decoy nation in the written records, all to protect the true Yamato-ju. Section 2. Deciphering the Rofu Standard. The crucial key to seeing through this ancient veil lies in the Rofu. It's a strict military tradition where envoys multiplied actual distances tenfold to magnify their reports to the ruler. You have to remember, these envoys were strict military men. Submitting false directions to your ruler, that meant severe punishment, sometimes even death. But projecting imperial majesty was practically required, so they recorded the absolute truth of their steps, but just scaled the numbers by a factor of 10 to make the journey sound unimaginably vast and grand. By dividing the standard measure of that era by 10, the sources propose an exact length of 45.9 meters, which seals the true scale of the ancient pads. The standard li of that era was well established. When you simply remove the tenfold exaggeration of the Rofu tradition, you are left with this extremely precise measurement. This right here is the game changer, the vital key that unlocks the true map of the Gishi-wajin-den. Section 3. Tracing the envoy path. Applying that 45.9-meter standard, the texts perfectly map the journey from Daifeng down to the true heart of Yamato. Every twist of the coastline, every treacherous stretch of water, and every single overland march just begins to snap right into place over the actual physical geography of the region. It completely strips away the confusion that has plagued historians for generations. Now look at how these exact measurements align. It is striking perfection, showing a near total match of 557 kilometers from modern Seoul to Chikuho. We aren't talking about a rough estimate here. It is a flawless alignment. When the ancient envoys wrote down their journey, they were acting as human compasses and measuring lines. The math literally leaves no room for doubt. Think about how incredible it is that ancient steps align this perfectly with the strict measurements of modern maps. The journey traces from the coastal domains, which were established long ago by Jofutsu, across the fierce waters to Iki, originally revered as Taka-Amahara. The ancient envoys specifically noted the terrifying swift currents of these straits. This island, Taka-Amahara, was a foundational site of the ancients. It was later masked in the records to appease foreign powers, but its true sacred name still echoes through the oldest traditions. The envoys then made their crucial landing at the sheltering natural harbor of Yobuko. The text describes a coastline rich with dense flora and diving fissures. It actually says the vegetation was so thick you couldn't even see the person walking in front of you, and that locals dove deep into the water for their catch. That perfectly, and I mean perfectly, describes the historical and geographical reality of the Matsura Peninsula. From there, a calculated overland march of exactly 500 li leads right to the western boundary of the Aito realm. There is zero guesswork here. The ancient text states a land journey to the southeast, and when you draw that exact line from the harbor using our true 45.9-meter measure, it drops you exactly at the ancient border. The sources detail this Ito domain as a vital staging ground. It was overseen by strict officials after a great inner conflict stripped its previous rulers of power. Essentially, it was a domain reduced in status and heavily monitored by the central authority. The envoys stayed here, interacting with local officials, rather than being permitted to just wander freely toward the sacred capital.
The path continues eastward across the vast plains of the Nara domain, steering the envoys ever closer to the capital. This area was incredibly wide and heavily populated. It served as a massive buffer zone and a vital land of sustenance, supporting the greater realm as travelers moved further inland.
Arriving at Fumi, where the river meets the sea, the envoys documented a land of abundance that served as the final gateway. The name itself speaks of the landscape, a place of brackish, mixing fresh and salt waters. Here, the land was rich enough to support grand raised dwellings, unlike the simple dugouts seen in poorer regions. This was the absolute final threshold before the core of the realm.
Section 4. Arrival at True Yamato-you.
The records describe a 1-month land march, which brilliantly illustrates that the true Yamato lay inland in Kyushu, completely avoiding the impassable sea straits. Think about this carefully. A continuous walk of 1 month. If the destination were across the water in the east, boats would have definitely been explicitly recorded. The lack of a water crossing in this final leg proves the capital had to be situated deeply within the inland territories of Kyushu itself.
The theory culminates right here, proposing that the Waka-Hachiman shrine in Tagawa, Chikuho, is the genuine palace of Himiko Himekami. This is the true Yamato. The sanctuary of the great deity wasn't lost. It was carefully insulated by distance, fierce terrain, and eventually by the intentional rewriting of the nation's own memory.
Section 5. The enduring local evidence. Even after centuries, the landscape itself retains the memory of the past, matching local names to the very envoys mentioned in ancient scrolls. For example, the name of Tagawa traces back to Takaba, an ancient name still echoing through unwritten local lore. Furthermore, the name of a specific ancient envoy, Uetsu, is stamped across the region in the form of Torigo place names. That is a dense, unmovable footprint of foreign envoys that simply does not exist anywhere else.
Physical remnants, like the intentionally destroyed bronze bells of Izumo, align with tales of ancient retributions ordered by Yamato. This is absolutely fascinating. The massive hidden burials of broken bronze in other regions weren't peaceful offerings, right? They were the result of a deliberate, calculated subjugation by the true Yamato and Chikuho, demanding the destruction of rival sacred symbols. The earth literally holds the scars of these ancient conflicts.
And the native tales of sovereign Kiko remain fiercely alive in the local soil, acting as a time capsule untouched by the Central Eastern courts. While the central, rewritten narratives erased or moved these great figures, the local valleys and rivers of Chikuho still carry the bloodlines and the epic, unvarnished stories of the sovereigns. The local memory outlasted the official ink. We want to leave you with this thought. If the geography of an entire nation could be concealed just for survival, what other profound mysteries are still waiting to be uncovered? The true Yamato, the sanctuary of Himiko Himekami, and the incredible survival tactics of an ancient realm remind us that history is never just what is written on the page. It is carved into the earth itself. Keep questioning, keep exploring, and we'll see you in the next explainer.
You know, usually when you examine a historical map, there's this underlying assumption of absolute bedrock precision.
Right.
You look at a weathered piece of parchment, you trace the faded ink line of a river, you see the small triangles denoting a mountain range, and you just instinctively trust it. You view it as a reliable guide.
Yeah, that is the fundamental expectation, certainly. A map is supposed to be the objective truth of the ground beneath our feet, captured in ink.
Exactly. It is meant to show you exactly the terrain you are navigating.
Yeah.
But then you step into the shadowy world of ancient geopolitical survival.
Oh, absolutely. That is where things get complicated.
And suddenly that map you are holding is no longer a guide. It is a shield.
Right, a defensive tool.
We are looking at a cartographic and historical landscape today that is, well, honestly, it is an elaborate, desperate illusion.
Yes.
I want you to imagine a scenario. What if the foundational maps and the earliest chronicles of an entire civilization were deliberately forged?
And not out of ignorance, right.
Right, not because they lacked the proper surveying tools, but to save that very civilization from total annihilation.
It is the absolute definition of a historical magic trick. What we are exploring today is an intentional deception executed on a monumental scale.
A deception that shifted the very coordinates of reality to blind an advancing enemy. Welcome to a new deep dive.
It is going to be quite the journey.
Today we are setting out on a mission to uncover the true location of Yamato. We're going to do this by decoding ancient military logs, retracing footsteps, and unearthing the secret, desperate history of a nation pushed to the absolute brink of destruction.
The brink of complete erasure.
Yes, erasure. And for you listening, I want to plant a mystery in your mind right now. Decades ago, archaeologists began finding massive hoards of beautifully crafted, pristine bronze bells buried deep in the earth.
Hundreds of them.
Right, hundreds, hidden away with no explanation, completely disappearing from the historical record. Keep those mysterious bells in the back of your mind, because to solve the riddle of the map, we have to understand what happened to the people who cast them.
We have a really fascinating stack of sources for this deep dive. We will be examining the Gishi-wajin-den, which is an incredibly detailed Chinese historical chronicle compiled by foreign envoys.
The meticulous records.
Exactly. We will be looking at rigorous geographic measurements that challenge everything we thought we knew, and we will delve into the painstaking study of ancient place names.
So we are going to bridge ancient battlefields, hidden shrines, and a secret relocation that changed history forever. I'm so ready for this.
Let us get into it.
But to understand where Yamato truly is, we first have to understand why it was hidden in the first place.
Yes.
Why would a civilization erase its own coordinates?
Right. It seems counterintuitive until you look at the context.
And that takes us to a very specific, very bloody year, 663 AD, the Battle of Hakusukino. Take us there. Paint a picture for the listener. What exactly happened on those waters?
To understand the Battle of Hakusukino, you have to realize that this was nothing short of an apocalyptic event for the defending forces.
Not just a minor skirmish.
No, not at all. This was a clash of titans that decided the fate of the entire archipelago. We are talking about the massive, highly organized allied forces of the Tang and Silla completely crushing the defenders.
When you say massive, what kind of scale are we talking about? Put it in the boats.
Imagine the sea literally churning with foreign warships. The historical records describe fleets so large they blocked out the horizon.
Oh, wow.
The sky was thick, just choked with the black smoke of burning vessels. The defending fleet was entirely outmatched, outmaneuvered, and overwhelmed by superior numbers and tactics.
A complete disaster.
It was a slaughter on the water. But the true horror was not just the military defeat. It was the existential crisis that immediately followed.
Because the threat wasn't just losing a battle, right? It wasn't just about paying a heavier tribute or losing a stretch of coastline.
No, it was about total subjugation. The immediate looming threat was becoming a vassal state to the Tang Empire.
Which means the complete end of their sovereignty.
Exactly. It meant the erasure of their distinct cultural identity, their laws, their lineage. The Tang forces were ruthless in their expansion.
So the defeated nation was staring directly into the abyss of total conquest.
The cost of this single battle was unfathomable. Two sovereigns paid the ultimate price during this dark, chaotic era.
Sovereign Tenchi and Sovereign Tenmu, right?
Yes, Sovereign Tenchi and Sovereign Tenmu. The leadership was fractured, the military was decimated, and the enemy was essentially at the gates.
So put yourself in the shoes of the survivors. What does a civilization do when it is facing absolute erasure?
You cannot just fight back.
Right. Your military is at the bottom of the sea. You cannot fortify the beaches because you don't have the manpower. You have to get incredibly creative, incredibly quickly.
And here is where our sources detail something so audacious it is hard to believe. They orchestrated what is described as a top-secret national eastward relocation.
Executed meticulously over multiple generations.
It was a survival strategy of unprecedented scale and unimaginable patience. To survive the wrath of the Tang, they realized they could not simply run.
The Tang reach was just too vast.
Exactly. Instead, they had to disappear.
Yeah.
But, well, you cannot simply hide an entire civilization in a forest.
No.
If you cannot hide the physical people, you have to change what the enemy believes to be true about the land itself. You have to manipulate reality.
And their primary weapon in this deception was not a sword, but a chronicle. The Nihon Shoki.
The foundational text.
But writing a history book when your cities are about to be burned down seems, I don't know, counterintuitive, unless the book is the defense mechanism itself.
Precisely. It was a diplomatic shield masquerading as a historical record. The Nihon Shoki was intentionally written in classical Chinese,
utilizing the specific grammatical structures and vocabulary favored by the continent. Writing your own foundational history. in the exact language of the enemy who just slaughtered your fleet, that is not a book meant for your own citizens to read by the hearth.
No, definitely not.
That is a message in a bottle designed specifically to wash up on the Tang court's shores. You're giving them the exact calculated narrative they want to read in the language they respect.
That is a perfect way to look at it. It was meant to be read, analyzed, and filed away by the Tang bureaucracy.
And what was the primary goal?
The primary desperate goal was to deceive the Tang into believing that the Nihon located in the Kinai region,
Which corresponds to modern-day Nara.
yes, that this Nihon in Nara was a completely different, entirely separate country from the defeated Wa in Kyushu.
It is like an entire civilization, adopting a new lineage and vanishing. They essentially faked their death on the battlefield, packed up their sacred artifacts, moved across the mountains and valleys, and adopted a new, but eerily similar identity.
To avoid the wrath of a massive empire.
They were telling the Tang, those people you crushed in Kyushu, terrible business, but that wasn't us. We are an entirely different, ancient, and peaceful nation over here in the East.
But to pull off a deception of that magnitude, you cannot simply draft a polite letter and change a few provincial names.
Right.
You have to manipulate the two foundational pillars of reality, time and space.
Time and space.
Yeah.
Let us examine how they manipulated time first. The chronicles utilized a very specific framework known as the spring and autumn double calendar.
Yes, the double calendar.
I want to break this down because when I read this in the sources, it completely warped my understanding of ancient timelines.
Yeah.
How exactly does a calendar manipulate time to hide a nation?
In our standard understanding, a year is one full revolution around the sun, right? Encompassing all 4 seasons.
Right.
But in the spring and autumn double calendar framework, the passage of time is marked by the equinoxes. The period from spring to autumn is counted as one full year,
Okay.
and the period from autumn to the following spring is counted as a second distinct year.
So a person who lived 30 actual orbits around the sun would be recorded in the chronicles as having lived 60 years.
Precisely. Now, apply that mathematical framework across generations of rulers, across the entire lineage of the sovereign.
Oh, I see. By doing this, the scribes artificially aged the nation, pushing its foundational date back by roughly 600 years.
Which lands them exactly at the year 660 BC. This is brilliant.
It is brilliant. By making themselves look incredibly ancient, they establish a lineage that vastly predates the recent conflict.
Exactly. When the Tang read the Nihon Shoki, they see an ancient, unbroken lineage stretching back millennia.
Making it seem chronologically impossible that these dignified ancient rulers were the same upstart, chaotic nation that just fought them at Hakuzuki-no.
It creates an insurmountable temporal distance between the new identity and the old actions. But manipulating time is only half the equation.
Right. You must also manipulate space. How do you move geography? How do you convince an envoy standing in a new land that this is where your people have always been?
You do it through the absolute power of administrative decree. And this brings us to the year 713 AD.
And something called the two-character Good Auspice Edict. What did this edict actually do to the map?
The edict was a masterful stroke of bureaucratic camouflage. The central authority mandated that place names across the provinces be standardized into favorable two-character names.
Okay, that sounds innocent enough.
But beneath this veneer of standardization, they used the edict to carefully transplant and mirror the ancient Kyushu place names directly into the Kinai region.
So they are literally taking the name of a mountain in Kyushu, walking hundreds of miles east to Nara, finding a mountain that looks somewhat similar, and declaring this is now that mountain.
Exactly. They created a geographical replica. They brought the names of their rivers, their sacred groves, their valleys, and overlaid them onto the new topography.
Imagine the sheer psychological weight of that endeavor. Recreating your lost homeland in a foreign valley.
If a Tang envoy came to inspect the Kinai region, they would hear familiar names that matched ancient records, but the physical coordinates were entirely different.
The nomenclature was identical, but the position had shifted.
It confused foreign powers completely, creating an impenetrable labyrinth of duplicated geography.
So we have a mathematically manipulated calendar, artificially aging the nation by 6 centuries, and a geographically mirrored landscape transplanting the names of the old world onto the new.
It is an absolute masterpiece of misdirection.
But this creates a massive problem for us today. If the map and the chronicles were deliberately forged to point to Nara, how do we possibly prove that the true original Yamato-yu was actually back in Kyushu?
We have to see through a 1,000-year-old illusion.
How do we do that?
To see through the illusion, we must consult a document that predates the Grand Deception. We must look to the chronicles written before the Battle of Hakusukino, before the desperate relocation.
So we have to look at the Gishi-wajin-den.
Yes, the detailed records compiled by the Chinese envoys hundreds of years earlier.
Yeah.
However, to read their geographical records correctly, we must crack a very strict military code.
Now, I want to talk about the traditional academic debate here, because for decades, historians have looked at the distances recorded in the Gishi-wajin-den. They have tried to map them out, and they have just thrown their hands up in frustration.
They absolutely have.
They look at the numbers and say, these distances are wild exaggerations. The Chinese envoys must have been guessing, or they had a terrible sense of direction, or they were just making it up to sound impressive.
Which is a profound, almost arrogant underestimation of ancient Chinese cartographic and geographic mastery.
Right.
The traditional debate dismisses these numbers merely because they do not seem to align with our modern maps upon a casual first glance. But I emphatically refute the notion that these envoys were simply guessing.
The geographical mastery of ancient Chinese civilization was unparalleled in the world at that time.
Unparalleled.
Right. Our sources point out some incredible physical evidence to back this up. We are talking about artifacts unearthed from the Han Dynasty.
The silk maps.
Yes, silk maps that are astonishingly precise. These aren't abstract drawings. They show military garrisons, population centers, and river curves with a level of accuracy that looks almost like a modern topographical survey.
And we absolutely cannot forget the legendary south-pointing chariots.
Oh, right. Tell us about those.
This was a mechanical marvel. It was a complex, gear-driven vehicle used specifically for precise, unwavering navigation across vast, featureless plains.
So they weren't just wandering aimlessly.
Not at all. They possessed the knowledge, the mathematics, and the administrative rigor to measure the Earth with incredible exactitude. Furthermore, we must consider the authors themselves.
The envoys who drafted the Gishi-wajin-den.
Yes, they were not poets writing fanciful travelogues. They were hardened military men, scouts, and high-ranking diplomats reporting directly to their sovereign.
And imagine the stakes of the reporting were incredibly high.
The highest imaginable.
In that era, submitting a false geographic report, miscalculating the distance to a neighboring realm, or exaggerating the size of a tributary state wasn't just a minor administrative error that gets you demoted.
It was a capital offense. It was punishable by death.
Wow.
The sovereign relied on these distances to calculate troop movements, supply lines, and taxation. You do not lie to the sovereign about the distance to a foreign shore.
Therefore, logic dictates that the numbers written in the text must be meticulously accurate.
However, they are accurate according to a specific internal bureaucratic framework.
Which brings us to the ultimate breakthrough of this deep dive, the Rofu custom. I need you to explain this because this is the skeleton key that unlocks the entire map. What is the Rofu custom?
The Rofu custom is a strict, highly formalized military reporting framework utilized during the era. In this framework, the actual physical distances measured on the ground were multiplied exactly by 10 before being recorded in the official chronicles.
Wait, I have to push back on this.
Go ahead.
You just said that lying to the sovereign about distances was a capital offense punishable by death. If a scout walks 10 miles but writes down 100, isn't that falsifying military documents? Isn't that incredibly risky? Why multiply by 10? Why not just invent a different unit of measurement entirely?
It is a vital question. But you must understand that within the administrative culture of the time, this was not considered a lie. It was a standardized translation of scale.
So everyone knew about it.
Yes. The sovereign and the high court were fully aware of the Rofu custom. The purpose was ideological as much as it was administrative.
Ideological in what way?
The goal was to project a majestic scale, to amplify the prestige and the sheer, overwhelming grandeur of the sovereign's reach. When a report is read aloud in the capital detailing the journey to a distant tributary, you want the realm to sound endlessly vast.
Oh, I see. A journey of 1,000 li sounds far more imposing, far more fitting of an empire than a journey of 100 li.
Exactly. It was a mathematical projection of majestic scale.
Okay, that makes sense. It is an accepted bureaucratic exaggeration, a known formula. The court knows the code. The generals know the code. So let us do the math on this to find the real physical distance, because this is crucial for tracing the map.
Let us do the math.
Our sources tell us that in the era of the Wei, the standard physical measure of 1 li was exactly 459 meters.
Correct. That is the bedrock measurement. So if we apply the Rofu military reduction,
Meaning we take their recorded numbers, which were multiplied by 10, and divide them by 10 to revert back to the actual walkable physical distance.
yes, the functional distance for decoding the Gishi-wajin-den becomes exactly 45.9 meters per li.
45.9 meters per li. I'm looking at the jagged coastlines, the treacherous mountains, the winding valleys of modern geography. Can a rigid mathematical formula from an ancient scroll genuinely map perfectly onto the physical Earth today?
It sounds almost too clean, doesn't it?
It sounds too perfect.
That is the ultimate test of any historical theory. The only way to prove the absolute validity of the Rofu code is to walk the path. We must trace the exact route of the ancient envoys, step by step, harbor by harbor,
Using this exact measurement of 45.9 meters per li.
and see where the Earth leads us.
I'm ready. Let us unroll the scroll and start the journey. According to the chronicles, this epic expedition begins at the Daifang Commandery.
Which corresponds to the bustling center of modern-day Seoul.
Okay.
The text explicitly states that the total distance from the Daifang Commandery to the ultimate destination of Yamato is exactly 12,000 li.
Okay, let us apply our skeleton key. 12,000 li multiplied by our functional Rofu measurement of 45.9 meters. That gives us a total distance of roughly 557 kilometers.
If you take a map right now and draw a perfectly straight line from the ancient center of modern Seoul directly to Tagawa City in the Chikuho region of Kyushu,
Let me guess.
the physical distance is roughly 555 kilometers.
That is staggering.
It is.
That is an astonishing 101.1% accuracy. That gives me chills just thinking about it. Over a massive expanse of untamed land and violent sea, over the course of thousands of years, a measurement of 557 kilometers versus 555 kilometers is not just a coincidence.
No, it is practically a geographical perfection. It immediately and irrefutably validates the Rofu framework. The math is sound.
The math is absolutely sound,
Sure.
but the total distance is just the outline.
Right. We must follow their specific granular stops to see the texture of their journey. From Seoul, the text details the route proceeding southeast, winding along the coast until they reach Gaya.
Which is modern-day Busan.
Yes. And the text defines Gaya with a very particular, very significant phrase. It calls it not just a port, but the northern shore of Wa.
The northern shore. That is a critical illuminating detail. When we think of this ancient civilization, we intuitively confine them entirely to the islands.
Most people do.
But calling Busan the northern shore indicates that the realm of Wa had an ancient, deeply established, and recognized foothold on the continent itself. They were a transmarine presence.
Precisely. They controlled the crossing. From Busan, the true peril of the journey begins.
The crossing.
They must cross what the Chinese scribes ominously called the Hanhai. This translates roughly to a vast, treacherous, boundless ocean. We know this body of water today as the Tsushima Strait.
And for envoys who were accustomed to the relatively calm, predictable flow of the great continental rivers, the fast-flowing, violent, swirling currents of this strait must have been absolutely terrifying.
Beyond terrifying.
You are in wooden vessels, at the mercy of the wind and the deep ocean currents, crossing into the unknown.
It was a crossing that demanded great skill and great courage. They navigate the treacherous waters and make landfall on the island of Tsushima, resting and resupplying. Then they make the next arduous crossing to Iki Island.
And it is here, on Iki Island, where the historical texts reveal a fascinating layer of diplomatic cryptography. I love this part of the deep dive.
It is brilliant.
The sources reveal that the island we know today as Iki was originally known by a vastly different, deeply sacred name, Taka-Amahara, the realm of the heavens in ancient mythology.
Now, I want you to imagine the sheer diplomatic panic of being a strict, rule-bound envoy representing the Wei sovereign. You have survived the terrifying ocean crossing, you land on this tributary island, and you ask the local chieftain what the land is called.
And they tell you, with complete sincerity, that you are standing in the realm of the heavens.
It is a massive diplomatic insult.
Right. The Chinese sovereign claims the absolute mandate of heaven. Heaven is his domain. You cannot possibly write a formal military report back to your sovereign and say, "Greetings, I have successfully crossed the sea, I just visited heaven," and the local chieftain sends his regards.
That is treasonous. It challenges the entire cosmic order of the empire.
So what did the scribes do? They couldn't erase the island from the map, but they couldn't write the name.
They engaged in brilliant linguistic camouflage. They altered the physical strokes of the written word. The character for heaven in their written records was physically dismantled.
Dismantled.
By deconstructing the brushstrokes of the character, heaven was split into two separate mundane characters, one and great.
Wow.
When read aloud, these characters are pronounced as itai or ito.
It is so clever. It is a bureaucratic sleight of hand. You take a highly inflammatory, treasonous word, physically break the strokes apart on the parchment, and reassemble it into a harmless phonetic sound.
The local people still know they live in Taka-Amahara, but the bureaucrats back in the Tang court just see a mundane tax registry for a place called Itai.
And over time, through centuries of mispronunciations, local dialect shifts, and revisions, this morphed into the modern name Iki.
It demonstrates how they preserved the physical geography while completely neutralizing the political threat within the text.
That is fascinating. But the Gishi-wajin-den does not merely provide us with hidden names, right? It offers a vivid, deeply observant window into the socioeconomic reality of the society.
Yes. The records meticulously describe the local architecture, specifically noting the presence of houses only on Iki Island and a place called Fumi.
And we have to clarify what they mean by houses, because they aren't just talking about a place with a roof.
No, this is a vital socioeconomic clue. In the terminology of the envoys, when the text specifically denotes a house, it is referring to advanced raised floor architecture.
Which is hard to build.
Very. Building a raised floor structure requires significant straight timber. It requires advanced carpentry skills, architectural planning, and most importantly, great wealth to commission.
In stark contrast, the texts note that the inhabitants of other surrounding regions lived in structures described merely as doors.
Which is a polite, bureaucratic way of describing pit dwellings. A simple, rudimentary hole dug into the earth, covered with a thatched roof and accessed via a door on top.
So the distinct architectural disparity recorded by the envoys proves that Iki was not just a desolate, rocky outpost.
Exactly. It was an ancient, immensely wealthy trading hub. It possessed the economic power capable of supporting a high standard of living, undoubtedly funded by their strategic control of the lucrative maritime trade routes across the strait.
They were the toll keepers of the ancient world.
They were.
From the wealth of Iki, the envoys prepare for the final ocean crossing to the mainland of Kyushu. They arrive and make landfall at a place called Matsura. Today, we know this location as Yobuko Port.
And the descriptive power of the Gishi-wajin-den is incredibly vivid at this exact location. The envoys write about confronting dense, dark, almost impassable forests growing right down to the rocky shoreline.
But they also make a very specific observation about the local inhabitants. They note with fascination that the people here dive deep into the treacherous waters, regardless of the depth or the season, to catch fish and harvest abalone.
Yes, the divers.
I cannot tell you how much I love that detail, because it connects this dusty, ancient military text to something so visceral and tangible that you can witness today.
It really does.
The deep diving traditions for abalone are still intensely alive in Yobuko right now. You can travel to the bustling morning markets in Yobuko, smell the salt in the air, and watch the descendants of those exact same divers pulling the exact same harvest from the exact same sea. It bridges thousands of years in an instant. It makes the history breathe.
It is a profound continuity of culture. It proves beyond a shadow of a doubt that the Chinese envoys were not fabricating a mythical land.
They were observing the gritty, physical reality of the land and its people with astonishing clarity.
Absolutely.
So we have survived the Hanhai. We have safely landed on the shores of Kyushu at Yobuko Port, surrounded by the deep-sea divers. The maritime portion of the journey is officially over, and the pass finally moves inland.
And this is where the journey physically splits, leading us to a crucial, undeniable geographical deduction.
Let us trace their steps precisely. From the landing at Matsura, the text states they walk exactly 500 line to the southeast.
We apply our Rofu measurement. 500 line multiplied by 45.9 meters gives us exactly 23.3 kilometers.
And if you stand at Yobuko Port today and trace a line exactly 23.3 kilometers to the southeast,
you arrive perfectly at a location historically known as Ito.
And this isn't just a vague general area somewhere in the hills, right?
No, the sources anchor this precise measurement at the Fuchigami Shrine, situated right at the dramatic edge of the Safuri Mountains.
Wow. From Ito, the envoys proceed to Fumi.
Remember those raised floor houses we discussed earlier? Fumi is the other wealthy region noted for advanced architecture, and Fumi provides us with another extraordinary linguistic clue.
Fumi is located in the area of modern-day Ashiya. Now, looking at those two words, Fumi and Ashiya, they don't sound anything alike. How do we get from one to the other?
We must look at the paleogeography, the ancient landscape. The word fumi is a phonetic corruption of the much older word afumi.
Yep.
Yes. Afumi translates directly to brackish water, or a specific geographical place where fresh river water and salty ocean water mix.
Ah.
If we examine the geological history of the Onga River mouth near Ashia during the ancient era, it perfectly matches this description. It was a massive, sprawling, ancient lagoon. The physical environment literally provided the name for the location.
So the ancient distances, the physical geography, and the linguistic roots all align in perfect harmony. But it is here, at this brackish lagoon of Fumi, that the route decisively forks.
Yes. The Gishi-wajin-den provides two separate sets of directions for two different destinations. One path is described as a 20-day water journey to a place called Tuma.
Which our sources identify as the powerful region of Izumo.
Correct. And the other path, the critical path, is described as a 1-month land journey to our ultimate destination, Yamato.
I want you listening to pay very close attention to this because this is the cornerstone of the entire geographic argument. This is where we find the definitive, undeniable proof that Yamato was in Kyushu and not hundreds of miles away in Nara.
Yes. The phrasing in the chronicle is exact and deliberate. A 1-month land journey.
Land journey.
This specific terminology dictates that the envoys traveled entirely on foot overland from their landing point at Yabuko port all the way to the capital of Yamato.
Because the text explicitly states they strictly walked.
Exactly. It means they did not utilize boats for this leg of the journey. And if they did not take boats, it is physically, geographically impossible for them to have crossed the Kanmon Strait to reach the main island of Honshu.
Therefore, by the unyielding laws of geography, Yamato must be located entirely on the island of Kyushu.
It is a geographical lock. You simply cannot walk across the ocean to Honshu. The map is sealed.
The map is sealed. But let me ask you about the logistics of this, because the timing feels wildly off.
How so?
Well, we know the location is in the Chikuho region. The physical distance from Yabuko port to the Chikuho region is about 90 kilometers. If the text says they are walking this 90-kilometer stretch in 30 days, that means they are moving at a pace of roughly 3 kilometers a day. I have to be honest, 3 kilometers a day is barely a leisurely stroll. Why are they moving so incredibly slow, with the envoys crawling through the mud?
It is a natural question, and it seems incredibly, almost absurdly slow to our sensibilities, where we measure travel by the swiftness of a horse or a carriage. But you must transport your mind back to the massive logistical reality of an ancient diplomatic procession.
It wasn't just a couple of guys walking.
No. This was not a solitary, unburdened traveler moving swiftly along a paved trail. This was a massive, lumbering caravan of profound political importance.
They were carrying things.
They were transporting incredibly heavy, fragile, and priceless tributes. Massive bronze mirrors, endless bolts of delicate silk, heavy ceremonial weapons, and provisions for a small army of guards, scribes, and translators.
Right, and as we established at Yabuko, they are facing dense, impassable forests. There are no paved highways. They are cutting through underbrush, navigating steep ravines and crossing unpredictable rivers without the luxury of sturdy bridges.
Furthermore, and perhaps most importantly, this is a high-level diplomatic mission passing through a highly fractured, heavily guarded landscape. They are not simply walking from point A to point B.
They're essentially navigating a minefield of local politics.
Yes, they must stop at the borders of every local chieftain's territory. There are elaborate, time-consuming greeting ceremonies. There are ritual exchanges of gifts, mandatory feasts that last for days, and inevitable delays while waiting for astrologically auspicious weather to proceed.
So a pace of 3 kilometers a day is not a leisurely stroll. It's a pace that perfectly reflects the heavy, ceremonial, cautious, and intensely political movement of a foreign envoy through an unfamiliar and potentially hostile realm.
It is a parade of power.
That reframes it completely. It is a slow, methodical assertion of diplomatic presence. Okay, so we have followed the Rofer measurements perfectly. The math is solid, the geography aligns, and the timeline makes logical sense for a grand caravan.
The map places Yamato firmly, unequivocally in the Chikuho region of Kyushu.
But knowing the coordinates on a map only tells us the where. Geography is just the stage. To truly understand the soul of this civilization, we need to know the who.
Yes, the people.
Who were the people who ruled this ancient hidden heartland? Where did their authority come from?
To understand the rulers of Yamato, to grasp the true weight of their lineage, we must look far beyond the shores of the Islers. We must look back through the mists of time to the very origins of civilization itself. We have to examine the profound legacy of the Dongji.
The Dongji, the ancient Eastern people.
Yes. The civilization of Yamato does not exist in a vacuum. It has profound, ancient, and deeply philosophical roots, tracing directly back to these people.
Now, the traditional, widely accepted historical narrative often centers the origins of civilization purely in the central plains of the continent. It paints a picture of civilization radiating outward from the center.
But a rigorous examination of physical history and ancient texts reveals a vastly different truth. The foundational figures of ancient Chinese civilization, the ultimate cultural ancestors revered by millions, were actually Dongyi.
Hailing from the eastern coastal regions.
Yes. We are talking about the legendary figures of antiquity, the three sovereigns.
These are the titans of myth and history. The sovereign of heaven, known as Jofutsu, or Surin in other texts. The earth sovereign, known as Fuxi, and the human sovereign, known as Shinong.
These monumental figures were not from the inland central plains. Their origins lie firmly in the eastern coastal territories, the ancestral homeland of the Dongji.
And what fascinates me most about these figures is the philosophy behind their rule. When you look at ancient empires, rulers are almost always remembered for their violence. They are remembered for the armies they raised, the cities they burned, the blood they spilled to conquer their neighbors.
But the three sovereigns are remembered for something entirely different. They are remembered for what they gave to humanity.
They embodied the ultimate philosophy of cultural heroism.
Their authority was not built on fear, but on foundational innovation. According to the Chronicles, the Sovereign of Heaven brought the mastery of fire to the people, ending the dark era of eating raw meat and freezing in the winter.
The earth and human sovereigns brought the revolutionary domestication of animals, the intricate knowledge of agriculture, the turning of the soil, and the foundational order of herbal medicine.
Their power was not derived from the sharp edge of a bronze sword, but from the peaceful, profound reverence of the people they uplifted. They brought order to a chaotic world through innovation, nurture, and care.
It is such a beautiful, aspirational foundation for a civilization, a rule based on elevating the human condition. But sadly, it stands in stark, brutal contrast to what eventually swept across the continent later.
The historical sources contrast this peaceful sovereign philosophy with a much darker ideology, the path of conquest.
The path of conquest.
Which is often associated with the title of Dai, or conqueror, and it represents the ideology of violent regime change. It is the cynical belief that supreme power rightfully belongs to whoever possesses the military might to take it by force.
When this path of conquest began to rise, sweeping relentlessly across the central plains with massive armies and war chariots, the pure, peaceful lineage of the original sovereigns was suddenly in mortal danger.
They were facing total eradication by those who favored the sword over the plow.
So, facing the annihilation of their peaceful order, they had to flee. They had to become refugees of philosophy.
They did. The ancient chronicles recount that Jofutsu departed from the coastal region of Shandong, the ancient and sacred homeland of the Dongji.
But he did not flee alone into obscurity. He purposefully took with him youths who bore the pure, uncorrupted lineage and the sacred knowledge of the three sovereigns.
They set sail across the Eastern Sea, desperately seeking a sanctuary where the original peaceful order of civilization could be preserved and nurtured, far from the endless slaughter of the Central Plains.
And this fleeing lineage, carrying the seeds of the old world, eventually reaches the islands. The sources specifically mention a figure named Nikihayahi.
Nikihayahi is recognized in the chronicles as a direct descendant, a true inheritor of this ancient Dongyi bloodline. He arrived in Taka-Amahara, the realm of the heavens we discussed earlier, with a sacred mission to preserve this heritage.
He did not arrive as an invading warlord.
No. He brought with him the profound, life-giving knowledge of advanced agriculture, the precise observation of the turning of the seasons, and the deep, harmonious philosophies of the ancient sovereigns.
Understanding this philosophical lineage fundamentally changes how we view the titles they used. When the rulers of Yamato insisted on being called the sovereign, it wasn't just about sounding important to foreign diplomats.
It wasn't just a shiny royal title.
It was a defiant, deeply rooted political manifesto. By claiming the title of sovereign, they were looking back across the dangerous sea at the massive, terrifying empires built on endless conquest and bloodshed, and they were declaring to the world, "We reject your violence. We reject your path of conquest. We represent an older, purer, and more righteous order."
They were actively legitimizing their unbroken, peaceful lineage as the true original heirs of civilization itself. It is a profound and incredibly brave declaration of identity.
In an era defined by brutal warfare, they deliberately preserved and championed the ancient philosophical framework of cultural heroism that the continent had abandoned.
Yes.
With that deep philosophical foundation laid, we need to zoom in on the physical reality of this lineage. We know their ideals, but where did they physically rule from? Where was the throne?
This brings us to the sacred sanctuary of Himiko Himekami.
We have meticulously established through the Rofu measurements that Yamato-yu is definitively located in the Chikuho region.
An area also known in ancient historical records as Toyo-kuni. If we take a deep dive into the specific local lore and the ancient nomenclature of this region, we uncover fascinating, hyperlocal details that cement this history.
Give us an example.
For instance, the very name of the Tagawa area itself is derived from the ancient word Tagawa, which translates to hawk feather.
And as our sources reveal, that name wasn't just an accident of local dialect. It was a formal title bestowed by sovereign Keiko.
Precisely. It bears the mark of the sovereign's direct influence. And it is within this specific, deeply historical region that we can identify the true physical palace of Himekami.
The historical records identify her seat of power as the Iware no Waka-Sakura Palace.
Yes. Today, through geographical tracing and the continuity of sacred sites, the location of this ancient palace corresponds directly to the grounds of the Waka-Hachiman Shrine and the closely associated Wakasaki Shrine located in modern-day Tagawa City.
It is truly amazing to think that these shrines, places of quiet reflection today, still stand on the exact coordinates where this monumental world-shaping history unfolded. But the sources go even further than just giving us an address.
They do.
They don't just tell us where Himiko Himekami lived. They rip away the veil of the Chinese chronicles to reveal her true, profound historical identity.
The true identity of the woman the Chinese envoys recorded as Himiko Himekami is Ikagashi Komi no Mikoto. Her position within the sacred lineage of Yamato is entirely unique and incredibly powerful.
She was not merely a passive consort.
She was the central pillar of the dynasty. She was a consort to two successive sovereigns, the 8th and the 9th, and she was the mother of the 10th sovereign Sujin.
That concentration of influence is staggering. To be the consort to two sovereigns and the mother of a third means she is the connective tissue, the absolute bedrock of authority for 3 generations of supreme rule.
But she wasn't just a figurehead sitting quietly in a palace. She was a wartime leader.
She lived during a period of terrifying instability, right?
Yes, a massive internal conflict known as the Great Wa Civil War. The realm was deeply fractured, with powerful regional factions violently vying for control of the archipelago.
And she stepped forward.
It was Ikagashi Komi no Mikoto who stepped forward, rallying the loyalist forces of Yamato. She led them to decisive victory, aggressively suppressing the rebellions and systematically restoring the fractured, bleeding realm back into a unified, functioning whole.
The Chinese texts, the Gishi-wajin-den, mention a crucial, slightly mysterious detail about her rule. They state that she had a male brother who aided her in the daunting task of governing the newly unified realm.
For a long time, historians debated who this shadowy figure could be. Based on the detailed lineage records and historical cross-referencing, this brother is definitively identified as Ikagashiku no Mikoto.
Their partnership was a brilliant division of labor.
While his sister secured the realm militarily and navigated the complex political alliances, he was entrusted with forging the spiritual foundation of the new nation.
He enacted a monumental, far-reaching religious reform.
Prior to his actions, the worship of the great deity was a highly intimate affair conducted privately right within the immediate quarters of the royal household.
Which makes perfect sense for a small, localized ruling family overseeing a modest territory. But if you were suddenly ruling a massive, newly unified realm that spans vast distances and diverse tribes, that localized intimacy suddenly becomes a severe political liability.
You need a symbol that unites everyone, not just the people who live in the palace.
Exactly. The religious framework had to evolve to meet the scale of the political reality.
Ikagashi no Mikoto deliberately separated the sacred worship of the great deity from the sovereign's personal domestic quarters. He established dedicated sanctuaries.
This strategic move elevated the great deity from a private family guardian to a truly national symbol, an omnipresent entity that oversaw and protected the entire unified realm.
It was a highly sophisticated evolution of their spiritual architecture, but his role wasn't entirely focused on peaceful spiritual reform.
He was also the sovereign's enforcer. The sources prominently mention his terrifying role in punishing the rebellious region of Toma.
Yes, Toma, which we confidently identified earlier through the geographical fork in the road as the powerful region of Izumo.
Ah, Izumo.
During the bitter depths of the Great Wa Civil War, Izumo committed a grievous, unforgivable betrayal against the forces of Yamato. In the harsh aftermath of the war, as the new unified order was being established, such blatant treason could not go unpunished.
To let it slide would invite further rebellion.
Ikagashiku no Mikoto was dispatched to enact that punishment.
And the punishment he enacted wasn't just executing a few rebel leaders or burning a fortress. It was far more insidious, deeply symbolic, and devastating.
It was a total spiritual and cultural disarmament.
Tell us what he did.
Izumo was forcibly stripped of their most sacred, defining artifacts, their massive, intricately cast bronze bells.
The bells.
These bells were not mere instruments. They were the very center of Izumo's regional identity, their spiritual authority, and their connection to the divine.
The victorious forces of Yamato seized these priceless bells. They violently marked them with severe X's to symbolize their permanent cancellation and defilement.
They physically broke the bronze, destroying their resonance, and then forced the people of Izumo to bury them deep in the dark earth, silencing their gods forever.
Okay, this is the massive aha moment that ties everything together. Remember, at the very beginning of this deep dive, I asked you to think about the mystery of the buried bronze bells.
It all comes together.
We're talking about the massive hordes of defiled bronze bells found at places like the Kamel Iwakura ruins today. For decades, archaeologists have scratched their heads, wondering why hundreds of pristine bronze bells were suddenly, inexplicably hidden in the dirt.
People theorized that maybe a panicked village was hiding them for safekeeping from unknown invaders.
But that is not it at all. They weren't hiding them, they were executing them. The bells were ritually executed and buried as a brutal, permanent punishment for treason.
It is a breathtaking revelation that perfectly, seamlessly aligns the ancient historical texts with the physical, tangible, archaeological evidence we pull from the ground today. The earth itself holds the violent scars of that ancient civil war.
That is incredible. The history is literally buried in the dirt. And speaking of things permanently etched into the physical landscape, if all of this incredible world-shaping history, the desperate diplomacy, the brutal wars, the grand caravans of foreign envoys took place right here in Chikuho, surely the people who witnessed it, the ordinary people living on the land, left some mark of it behind.
They absolutely did, and the undeniable evidence is preserved in the very names of the places themselves.
Place names.
In the year 247 AD, a Wei envoy named Utsu was dispatched by the continent to this specific region. His crucial mission was to observe the ongoing civil conflict between the forces of Yamato and its desperate rivals, and to report back on the shifting balance of power.
Uitsu. That specific name is the final key to our map.
It is. Because to this very day, if you look at a map of modern Fukuoka and the Chikuho region, there is an astonishing mathematically improbable concentration of places named Torigo, scattered exactly along the precise route his diplomatic caravan would have taken.
How does Uetsu become Torigo?
The phonetic shift from the ancient pronunciation of Usu to the modern word Torigo is a well-documented standard linguistic progression in this region.
Our sources list an incredible amount of these specific localized examples. There is the Torigo Tunnel carved through the rock in Moji. There is a mundane Torigo bus stop where commuters wait every morning.
There is Torigo Park in Hakata where children play.
There are numerous quiet hamlets, hidden valleys, and small winding roads, all bearing this exact ancient name.
This is the fascinating science of toponymy, the rigorous study of place names. Place names are incredibly resilient. They act as physical, geographical fossils embedded in the culture.
So when you meticulously map out the sheer density of the name Torigo in this specific, highly concentrated corridor, it is statistically impossible to dismiss it as a mere coincidence. It is not an accident of language.
It is the literal footprint of the ancient envoys, permanently etched into the map by the people who watched them pass.
I am deeply struck by the quiet poetry of this fact. Think about it. Thousands of years later, everyday people are standing on a street corner, checking their watches, waiting for a bus at a stop named Torigo.
Completely unaware.
They are completely blissfully unaware that the mundane name on the metal sign above their heads is a direct echo of a 3rd-century foreign diplomat, a man who walked that exact dusty path to witness the bloody fate of an ancient civilization. The grand, sweeping geopolitical drama of the ancient world is hiding right there, completely invisible, right beneath their feet.
It profoundly proves that while official chronicles can be rewritten by scribes, while calendars can be manipulated by decrees, and maps can be intentionally distorted by kings, the daily spoken memory of the ordinary people who live and work in the land is much, much harder to erase. The absolute truth leaves an indelible mark on the earth.
This has been a truly staggering, mind-bending journey. Let us take a quick look back at the massive path we have walked today. We started with the absolute terror and blood of the Battle of Hakusukino, an existential, apocalyptic threat that forced an entire civilization to undertake a massive eastward relocation.
Adopting a new lineage and artificially aging it by 6 centuries just to survive the wrath of the Tang Empire.
We saw how the Nihon Shoki was wielded as a brilliant diplomatic shield, moving mountains and rivers on parchment to protect the people. Then, we cracked the ancient Rofu military framework,
Proving that the distances recorded in the Gishi-wajin-den were not mistakes or exaggerations, but precise, methodical measurements of 45.9 meters per li.
This mathematical key allowed us to walk step by step alongside the Chinese envoys, from the bustling shores of Seoul across the terrifying currents of the Tsushima Strait, decoding the hidden, treasonous heavenly name of Iki Island, all the way to the deep-sea divers of Yobuko Port.
We traced their slow, heavy, 1-month march inland, definitively proving that they never took a boat across the strait to Honshu.
Thereby anchoring the true Yamato firmly, forever, in the Chikuho region of Kyushu. We explored the profound, peaceful philosophy of the Dongi, the ancient cultural heroes who brought the gifts of fire and agriculture.
And how the defiant rulers of Yamato chose the title of sovereign to champion a legacy of peace, directly challenging the continent's violent path of conquest.
And finally, we uncover the true formidable identity of Himiko Himekami Ikagashikome no Mikoto ruling from the sacred grounds of the Waka-Hachiman shrine, winning a brutal civil war and leaving the ritually broken buried bronze bells of Izumo as a silent testament to her power.
All while the foreign envoy Uetsu left his name scattered across the roads, tunnels, and parks of modern Fukuoka. It is a remarkable, unprecedented synthesis of geography, linguistics, and sheer political survival.
It really is. At the very start of this deep dive, we talked about how we implicitly trust maps to show us the objective, unvarnished truth. But we've seen today how the geography, the calendar, and the foundational chronicles of an entire civilization were deliberately masked, shifted, and aged for over 1,000 years just to protect its sovereignty from an overwhelming enemy.
It forces you to pause and wonder.
It does. As you look at the globe today, at the rigid borders we take for granted, at the names of the cities we live in, and the histories we accept as absolute fact, what other absolute historical truths are merely ancient, desperate diplomatic illusions that we simply forgot were illusions?
A truly haunting thought. The map, as we have seen, is not always the territory.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Keep questioning the map, look closely at the ground beneath your feet, and we will see you next time.